113 years have passed since the world suffered an unimaginable blow the day the Atlantic Ocean swallowed the Titanic. It became a global tragedy, leaving everyone in shock. The entire world had believed that, by some miracle, the Titanic could not sink. Such was the unshakable faith in its invincibility. The Titanic was an enormous ship, the largest passenger vessel ever built by mankind at the time. It was a ship of immense luxury, often compared to the grandest hotels on Earth, places you and I could only dream of entering. Skilled craftsmen spent nearly 3 years constructing the Titanic, and humanity hailed it as one of the wonders of the world. They named it Titanic, after Titans, the gods of ancient Greece, but that wasn't enough. They crowned it with the title, the Unsinkable, a ship believed incapable of sinking. 14 years before the Titanic was built, a man named Morgan Robertson wrote a novel called Futility. What made it astonishing was that this book foretold the entire fate of the Titanic. It described how the world would build an unprecedented giant ship, only for it to strike an iceberg, sink, and claim thousands of lives. Even more eerily, in the book the ship was named Titan, a name meaning the same as Titanic. It was chilling how Robertson's writing predicted the entire event. His book stated that the ship would sink in the month of April, and that's exactly what happened to the Titanic. Such unbelievable coincidences. More than 1,500 people perished in just 15 seconds that night, all because of a careless iceberg lookout named Frederick Fleet. Now let's go back to how it all began. In 1867, the Royal Bank of Liverpool collapsed, sending shockwaves throughout England. Among its victims was the White Star Line, a proud shipping company known for its voyages to Australia, now buried in debt. Everything was sold off for just £1,000. All that remained was a name and a flag. But from ruin came ambition. In early 1868, a 31-year-old seaman named Thomas Ismay saw more than just a fallen company. He saw opportunity. He purchased the name and flag, determined to build a shipping line of his own. Ismay wasted no time. He partnered with Belfast's leading shipbuilders, Harland and Wolff, pioneers in engineering and design. Alongside them stood William Perry, a master of negotiation, and Gustav Schwabe, a powerful financier. Together, they reimagined the White Star Line, a fleet built not just for speed, but for luxury, safety, and grandeur. By 1899, the people who had built White Star's legacy were starting to disappear. Ismay and Harland had passed away. Schwabe left for politics. Only Perry remained, now joined by Thomas Ismay's son, Joseph Bruce Ismay. Bruce was a smart businessman, but he wasn't a shipbuilder or a seaman. The hands-on spirit that once built great ships was slowly being replaced by boardroom meetings and financial reports. At the same time, White Star's main rival, Cunard, was pushing ahead. They focused on speed, faster ships, quicker crossings. And in those days, speed meant money and status. Governments gave mail contracts to the fastest liners. White Star started losing both profit and pride. They were no longer the leader. They were falling behind. In 1902, a powerful figure from across the Atlantic stepped in, J.P. Morgan. He was already building a shipping empire through his International Mercantile Marine Company. His goal? To control the global shipping industry. Morgan made an offer. He would buy a controlling stake in White Star, but only if Bruce Ismay stayed in charge. The company was now part of Morgan's growing empire, but with that deal came pressure to compete, to impress, to rise again. By 1907, a bold plan was underway. 3 massive sister ships, Olympic, Titanic, and Gigantic. These ships wouldn't win on speed. They'd win on size, style, and luxury. White Star was going to outshine Cunard, not by racing, but by building floating palaces. For White Star, this wasn't just about ships. It was a comeback, a last proud push to reclaim the top of the Atlantic. Construction of the Titanic began on 31 March 1909 in the city of Belfast, England. It took over 900 men to build the colossal Titanic. But even before touching the water, the Titanic had already begun to spill blood. During its construction, 246 accidents occurred, leaving many workers permanently injured, some dead. The Titanic took approximately 26 months to complete, 2 years and 2 months before it was finally ready to set sail. On May 31st, 1911, the Titanic was launched. A crowd of nearly 100,000 people gathered to witness what they called the wonder of the world. It took 20 powerful horses to pull the Titanic from the shipyard into the River Laga, where it would then be taken to the Atlantic. To ease its passage, 20 tons of oil and soap were spread along the slipway, allowing the massive ship to glide smoothly into the water. When the Titanic finally hit the ocean, the impact was far from gentle. Water surged violently, sending huge waves crashing into nearby ships. There it waited, docked, as people scrambled for a chance to board, unaware that this was no opportunity, but a curse in disguise. Some say this tragedy was written in fate itself. The Titanic was supposed to begin its journey earlier, but its maiden voyage was delayed to wait for its sister ship, the Olympic. Both vessels were built simultaneously. This delay forced the Titanic to sail in April, a month when the Atlantic Ocean was notorious for icebergs. Had it departed earlier, perhaps it would have never met its fate. Finally, on April 10, 1912, the Titanic set off from Southampton, England, cutting through the waves toward America. Its departure was the biggest news of the day. Had Instagram, TikTok, or Snapchat existed back then, the hype would have broken the internet. For 5 days, the voyage was pure luxury, until the night of April 14, 1912, the night of doom. At 11:40 p.m., in the middle of the Atlantic, the cold was bitter, the darkness thick. The only sounds were the calm wind and the ocean's waves. Inside the ship, the wealthy passengers had no idea that the angel of death himself was at the helm. People drank, feasted, and danced as the band played lively music. The Titanic pressed forward, slicing through waters littered with thousands of floating icebergs. The ship's captain, 62-year-old Edward Smith, had truly stepped in it that night. The Titanic was running at full speed, a decision many later blamed him for. Why did he push the ship to its limits when he knew they were entering dangerous, ice-infested waters? Separate warnings had been sent to the Titanic's radar, alerting the crew of massive icebergs ahead. Yet, the captain ignored them all, refusing to slow down. It's believed that Joseph Bruce Ismay, the ship's owner, drunk on the excitement of the Titanic's maiden voyage, was pressuring the captain to increase speed. So the Titanic raced on, blindly, like a man stumbling in the dark. There was no lookout with binoculars to scan the path ahead, no precaution to spot danger before it was too late. That night, the Titanic sailed straight into destiny. The man whose duty was to keep watch with the binoculars and scan the path ahead was named Frederick Fleet, a 25-year-old British sailor. This man had lost the keys to the emergency locker, so he decided to rely solely on his own eyes to navigate the Titanic's path through the thick darkness of the Atlantic Ocean.
Frederick Fleet couldn't believe his eyes. He saw a massive iceberg over 100 feet tall standing directly in their path. This made it even harder to spot early in the pitch-black night. And that's why some say it was as if this tragedy was destined to happen. By the time lookout Frederick Fleet saw the iceberg dead ahead, it was already too late. There was barely a minute left before collision. In a panic, death-fearing voice, he screamed, "Iceberg right ahead!" A cry that startled Officer William Murdoch, who was left in charge that night in the captain's absence. For 30 seconds, Murdoch stood frozen, mouth agape, staring death in the face, utterly speechless. Those 30 seconds of hesitation doomed the people aboard the Titanic. By the time he finally gave the order to turn the ship, it was too late. The vessel crashed into the iceberg on its right side, tearing massive gashes that began flooding the ship with violent force. Scientists argue that if Officer William Murdoch hadn't hesitated for those 30 seconds and had ordered the turn sooner, they might have avoided the iceberg altogether. Scientists also suggest that if the ship had struck the iceberg head-on, the damage might have been less severe. Perhaps the Titanic wouldn't have sunk at all. Thomas Andrews, the ship's chief designer, had engineered the Titanic with 16 watertight compartments. These were designed so that if one filled with water, it would not spill over into the next. The ship could remain afloat even if up to 4 of these compartments were breached. In the case of a direct head-on collision, it's likely that only 1 or 2 compartments would have been damaged, meaning the ship could have survived. The collision occurred at 11:40 p.m., and in that moment reality struck everyone. It took 2 hours and 40 minutes for the Titanic to sink and vanish from the face of the earth. Those were 2 hours of pure chaos, panic, confusion, and desperation. To make matters worse, when the Titanic set sail, it didn't carry enough lifeboats. They were supposed to be placed along the deck, but the designers didn't want to ruin the ship's elegant appearance. The Titanic had the capacity for 64 lifeboats, but they brought only 20, leaving them completely overwhelmed by the number of passengers. With so few lifeboats, they wasted an entire hour before even beginning evacuations. And when they finally started loading people, many boats left half empty, unnoticed in the panic. For example, the first lifeboat launched carried only 28 people, when it could have held 60. And then there was the infamous ladies first policy, which is why the majority of those who died on the Titanic were men. Women and children were given priority, while third-class passengers, my fellow poor souls, were completely forgotten. Their living quarters were deep in the ship's belly, while the upper decks were reserved for the wealthy. Third-class passengers were locked below as soon as the voyage began to keep them from disrupting the elite's parties. And tragically, even as the ship sank, no one remembered to unlock their doors. For them, there was no women and children first, no privilege at all. Most went down with the ship. Getting a first-class ticket wasn't something just anyone could afford. The price was $4,550, equivalent to 69,600 TEI. So if you and I had been on the Titanic, we'd have died right there alongside our third-class companions. The front of the ship began sinking first, slowly tilting downward, while the stern rose higher into the air. By the time nearly more than half the ship was submerged, the lights flickered and died, plunging everything into hopeless darkness. Then at 2:20 a.m., the Titanic, now standing vertically like a skyscraper, snapped in two. In that moment, no amount of cunning could save anyone. Every passenger was thrown into the freezing, merciless depths of the Atlantic. The sea showed no pity that night. The water temperature was -2 sheer, colder than a modern refrigerator. Medical experts say most victims who entered the water did not survive beyond a minute. The shock of the extreme cold caused instant cardiac arrest. Even those who resisted the initial shock froze to death within 15 minutes, their bodies turning to ice. Yet amid this carnage, one man defied the odds. Charles Jogan, the ship's baker. He floated in the water for 2 hours and was still alive when rescue arrived. His secret? Alcohol. Jogan had drunk heavily as the ship sank, leaving his blood so heated. He later claimed, "I didn't even feel the cold. I watched others turn to ice around me." For those who've seen Titanic movie, you'll recall the band playing as the ship went down. This was no Hollywood fiction. In reality, the Titanic's musicians kept performing, switching between ragtime and hymns as passengers fought for their lives. What conviction drove these men? What hope did they cling to? Of the 2,224 souls aboard, 1,514 perished. Only 340 bodies were recovered. The rest vanished into the abyss with the ship. Just 710 survived. And the last living survivor, Melvina Dean, a 2-month-old baby during the disaster, died in 2009 at age 97. For 74 years, the Titanic's wreckage remained lost. It wasn't until 1985 that explorers discovered it, 12,000 feet below the surface. For decades, wealthy adventurers could visit the site until 2012, when expeditions were banned due to cost and ethical concerns. The Titanic's captain, often remembered as a hero, worked desperately to save lives until his final moments. His last recorded words were, "Men, you've done your duty with courage. I ask nothing more. Now it's every man for himself. You know the law of the sea. May God bless you." In stark contrast, the ship's owner, Joseph Bruce Ismay, escaped on a lifeboat and later lived in seclusion on Ireland's coast, forever haunted by the ghosts of his decisions. Many have speculated about that fateful night, whispers of secret societies, of a silent hunt for 3 of the world's wealthiest men. Jacob Astor, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Isidor Straus, all said to oppose the creation of the Federal Reserve. Questions still linger. Why did J.P. Morgan, who was meant to be aboard, cancel at the last moment? Did he know something the others didn't?